The snow was falling sideways, sharp, icy blades that cut through the air like the world wanted her gone. Mira Dalton staggered across the wide Wyoming flats, her boots sinking into drifts that swallowed her steps. The baby in her arms barely whimpered anymore. That frightened her more than the cold. Babies didn't grow quiet unless they were losing the fight. Her breath came in ragged bursts, clouds of frost drifting past her cracked lips. She couldn't feel her fingers. She couldn't feel her legs. She wasn't sure she was even walking anymore. Maybe she was just falling forward, slowly, stubbornly, toward the place where death finally stopped waiting and simply reached out its hand. Then she saw him, a lone rider, emerging through the white blur like some uninvited miracle. A big man on a cold, dark horse, coat snapping in the wind, hat pulled low against the storm. He slowed when he saw her, his silhouette cutting a strong line against the snow-choked horizon. Mira dropped to her knees. The baby slipped in her arms. She clutched him tighter, breath hitching. The rider stopped 10 feet away. His voice carried through the storm, deep, steady, unshaken. "Ma'am, tell me, are you giving up, or are you asking to be saved?" Her answer would change everything. The snowstorm swallowed every sound. Only the wind spoke, howling across the open Wyoming flats like a warning sent straight from heaven or hell. Mira Dalton knelt in the drift, arms wrapped tight around her baby boy. She tried to stand. Her legs refused. Her body was past tired. It was shutting down. Every breath burned. Every heartbeat felt slower than the last. The rider's horse pawed the snow between them, snorting steam into the frozen air. The man in the saddle didn't move at first. He just watched her, quiet, steady, eyes hidden beneath the brim of his hat. Then he climbed down, boots crunching through the hard crust of ice. He walked toward her, deliberate steps, measured breath, a man used to storms and used to carrying other people through them. Mira lifted her chin, though she barely had the strength. "I'm not giving up," she whispered. The wind nearly stole her words. I don't know how to keep going." The cowboy stopped a few feet from her. Snow whipped between them, a curtain of white. He crouched low. "Then let me help you." His voice had weight, warm weight, like a fire burning somewhere safe. She hesitated, not because she feared him, because she'd been hurt by men before. Promises had teeth. Kindness had conditions. But the baby stirred weakly in her arms. A soft cry, barely a sound at all. That decided it. She looked up. "Please." The cowboy didn't wait another second. He slipped his arms under her and lifted her as if she weighed nothing. Her head fell against his shoulder, cheek pressed to a coat lined with wool and smelling faintly of cedar smoke. The horse stood steady as he helped Mira mount. She clutched her baby close as the cowboy swung up behind her, one strong arm braced along her side to keep her from falling. "You got a name?" he asked over the storm. "Mira." He nodded once. "Luke Arden." He clicked his tongue. The horse surged forward, hooves punching deep prints into the endless white. They rode through the storm with the sky closing in around them. Luke shielded her with his coat, leaning his body toward the wind. Each gust hit him full force, stealing heat and breath, but he didn't flinch. Mira felt his heartbeat against her back, slow, steady, grounding her when hers faltered. "How far?" she whispered. "Not far," Luke said. "My place is tucked behind that ridge, with stoves burning. You'll be warm soon." Warm. She could barely remember what that felt like. Her baby whimpered. Myra's heart lurched. Luke leaned closer. "Keep him against you. I'll keep the wind off." She adjusted the blanket, fingers stiff and clumsy. Luke noticed and covered her hands with his own, rough, strong, radiating heat through her numb skin. "Almost." "There," he said softly. The ridge finally appeared, dark against the swirling snow. Luke urged the horse up the slope, then down toward a cluster of cottonwoods. Hidden between them stood a sturdy log cabin, smoke rising from its chimney in a thin, brave line. He swung off the horse, lifting Mira down before her legs even touched the ground. She swayed. He caught her by the waist. "Easy. I got you." Her body trembled. Not from fear, but from the shock of being held with care instead of cruelty. Luke pushed open the cabin door. A wave of heat rushed out, washing over Myra's frozen face. The room glowed gold from a roaring fire. Cast iron pots simmered on the stove. Thick blankets hung over chairs to dry. It felt like stepping from death into life. Luke guided her inside and shut the door against the storm. He knelt beside her, gently pulling off her wet boots. Sit by the fire. Warm slow. Too fast will make you sick. She nodded, breath shaking. The baby whimpered again. May I? He asked. She hesitated, then handed him her son. Luke cradled the child with surprising gentleness, touching his forehead with the back of his hand. He's cold, Luke murmured, but breathing strong. We'll fix him up. He wrapped the baby in a thick wool blanket warmed by the stove, tucking the edges with careful precision. Mira watched, throat tight. She'd met men who claimed to be good. She'd met men who pretended to care. But she'd never met a man who handled a child like this, with quiet, instinctive tenderness. Luke returned the baby to her arms, then knelt again, close enough she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. You need hot broth and rest, he said. I'll get you both set. Mira tried to speak, but exhaustion dragged her voice down. No charge, she whispered. No. Favor you want in return. Luke stilled. His jaw tightened, just a fraction. Then his eyes softened. Ma'am, he stood slowly, offering her a cup of steaming broth. Not every man expects something for kindness. She looked away, ashamed of her own suspicion. But she'd lived the kind of life that carved suspicion into bone. Luke seemed to understand without needing the words. He set the cup down beside her and fed more wood into the fire, the flames rising higher, throwing warm light across the room. Thunder rumbled outside, snow hitting the roof in heavy sheets. Luke sat on the edge of the rug, hands resting on his knees, watching her with quiet concern. You ran from something, he said gently. Storm didn't put you out there alone. Myra's breath hitched. Memories she tried to bury clawed their way back. I didn't run for myself, she whispered. I ran for him. She looked down at her baby's face. Luke nodded once. Not pushing, just listening. The fire cracked sharply between them. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, something delicate, something close to trust, began to take shape. But storms always bring danger. And this one carried more than snow on its back. It carried the past. Her past. A past that wasn't finished with her. Not even close. The storm hammered the cabin through the night, shaking the shutters and rattling the chimney like an angry spirit demanding entry. But inside, the fire burned warm and steady. Mira lay bundled in blankets near the hearth, baby tucked safely against her chest. Her eyelids were heavy, body exhausted from days of cold, fear, and walking through a world that seemed to want her gone. Luke Arden didn't sleep. He sat in a chair beside the fire, boots planted firm, hat on his knee, keeping watch like a man used to guarding things more fragile than himself. Every so often, he glanced at her, quiet, careful, almost protective without admitting it. When the baby stirred, Luke leaned forward. He's warmer now, he said softly, colors back in his cheeks. Mira nodded weakly. His name is Noah. Luke's eyes warmed. Noah, he repeated, like he was testing how the name felt in the room. Strong name. Good name. Mira adjusted the blanket around the baby, her fingers trembling slightly. Luke noticed. You need food, he said. Proper food. I'll fix something. He moved to the stove and ladled venison stew into a bowl. The smell drifted through the cabin, rich, savory, comforting. Myra's stomach tightened with hunger she'd been trying to ignore for days. Luke handed her the bowl, then stepped back, giving her space. She ate slowly, each bite warming her from the inside. Noah slept peacefully at last. Luke returned to the chair, silent again. He didn't pry, didn't push, but the weight of the truth pressed on her chest until she couldn't hold it anymore. He would have killed us, she whispered. Luke's gaze lifted. Steady, patient. Ooh, my husband. The fire snapped sharply. Luke didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He didn't smother her with pity or shock. He waited. The sheriff called it a domestic matter. Her voice shook. The pastor called it marriage trouble. The town said I should pray harder. Be quieter. Be better. Luke's jaw tightened. My husband drank, she continued softly. And every time he drank, he blamed us for everything he hated about himself. Noah whimpered in his sleep. Mira soothed him with gentle strokes along his tiny back. He said if I ever left, he'd find me. And if he found me, her breath trembled, he'd make sure Noah didn't grow up to be soft. A long silence filled the cabin. Luke rose slowly and tossed another log onto the fire, sparks lifting like golden dust. Then he spoke. You did right leaving. Mira closed her eyes. I don't feel right. I feel scared. Luke crouched beside her again, elbows resting on his knees. That isn't fear talking. His voice dropped lower, warmer. That's you remembering pain. That's different. Her throat tightened. Storm didn't push you out there, Luke added. Desperation did. She opened her eyes and met his. You're safe here. Her breath caught, because he said it with a kind of certainty she hadn't felt in years. As if he wasn't offering safety, but promising it. Hours passed. The storm slowed. Snowlight pressed against the window, soft and blue. Luke stepped outside to check on the horse, leaving Mira with the fire and the quiet. When he returned, snow covered his coat, and he stomped his boots by the door. Storm's letting up some, he said, but road will be blocked for a day or two. Mira stiffened. A day or two. He caught the fear in her eyes. You're not trapped, Luke assured. Just snowed in. Big difference. She let out a slow breath. The fire. Babies like warm hands. No, Mira said softly. It's you. Luke paused. Just for a moment. Just long enough for her to see something flicker in his eyes. Before he could reply, a sound cracked through the stillness. Hoofbeats. Luke stood sharply. That's not one horse, he said. That's three. Fear stabbed through Mira. No, she whispered. No, he couldn't have found us this fast. Luke moved to the window, jaw locked, every muscle in his back tightening beneath his shirt. He watched the riders approach. Silent, cold, purposeful, creeping up the slope toward his cabin. He slid his rifle from the wall, not with panic, but with practiced ease. Mira, he said quietly, never looking away from the window. Take Noah. Go to the bedroom. Stay low. Her heart pounded. Luke now. Something in his tone, firm but gentle, cut straight through her fear. She gathered Noah, hurried to the small back room, and crouched beside the bed. She could hear her own heartbeat more than the footsteps outside. Then, boots on the porch. Snow shifting. Low voices. Someone knocked. Hard. Luke's voice carried through the cabin. Steady, deep, unshaken. State your business. A cold silence answered. Then a man spoke. A voice Mira recognized instantly. I'm looking for my wife. Her blood froze. We tracked her here, the voice snarled. Step aside, cowboy. Luke's voice didn't waver. This is my land, and that's my wife. Luke's next words were colder than the storm outside. No, sir. A man doesn't own people. The silence that followed was knife sharp. The cabin had become a powder keg, and one word, one breath, could set ablaze. The silence outside the cabin stretched so tight it felt like the next breath might snap it. Mira crouched in the back room. Noah pressed to her chest, her palm over his tiny head as if she could shield him with just her touch. His breath was warm against her skin. Her own breath came shallow, trembling. Her husband's voice, the voice she'd run from, the voice that chased her across states, the voice that broke every fragile piece of her, was now feet away. Luke stood alone in the center of the cabin, rifle lowered but ready. His shoulders squared, his jaw locked. He looked like stone carved into the shape of a man who decided something. He wasn't moving. Not this time. The door rattled again. You got 3 seconds to open up, Myra's husband growled. Or we break it down. Luke didn't blink. The man barked. Luke spoke calmly, almost softly, the way someone would speak to a snake that had crawled too close. You break my door, he said, and I promise you'll regret it. A low, angry laugh came from outside. You don't know who you're dealing with, and you don't know whose cabin you just rode up on. The second man outside, Mira, didn't know his voice but recognized the kind, mean eager, called out, We ain't here to talk philosophy, cowboy. We want the woman. Luke's jaw flexed. She's not going anywhere. The porch creaked. Footsteps shifted. Mira felt the old fear rising in her chest. The kind that stole breath, the kind that crushed ribs. She held Noah tighter, praying he would stay quiet, praying Luke knew what he was doing. Her husband's voice grew darker. She stole my boy. She stole what's mine. You hand her over, and we'll leave without trouble. She didn't steal anything, Luke said. She ran for her life. That's her story, the third man spat. Here's ours. A man's wife obeys him. Luke stepped closer to the door, voice steady as bedrock. Not anymore. A murmur passed between the men. Their boots scuffed in the snow. Myra's heartbeat hammered in her ears. Noah whimpered. She pressed him closer, kissed his forehead, whispered, "Please, baby, stay quiet." But children don't understand fear like adults do. Sometimes they cry when the world goes silent. And Noah's whimper rose again, louder this time. One of the men outside heard it. There, he hissed. She's inside. I heard the brat. Luke stiffened. Myra's blood turned to ice. Her husband spoke with cold triumph. Step aside, cowboy. That's my son. I'm taking him back. Luke lifted the rifle, not aiming it, but no longer keeping it lowered. No, he said. That boy is safe. And he's staying that way. And I said move. The door handle twisted violently. Luke didn't flinch. You want to think real careful, he said. Because the moment you cross that threshold, you're choosing a fight you can't walk away from. A huff of breath came from outside. Angry. Irritated. Mocking. You think you scare me? Myra's husband growled. No, Luke said. I think you underestimate what a man will do when he's got someone worth protecting. The floorboards beneath Mira creaked as she shifted Noah in her arms. She couldn't see Luke's face, but she felt something through the wall, a steady certainty, like he was a solid post in a storm. The kind of man who didn't back up, didn't run, didn't break. Her husband slammed a fist into the door, making the hinges shudder. That woman belongs to me. Luke's voice cracked through the air like a whip. She doesn't belong to anyone. The words hit like thunder. Myra's breath caught. Her heart twisted painfully because no one, not the sheriff, not the pastor, not the neighbors, not her own family, had ever said those words for her. Not once. Her husband snarled. You think you can hide her? I'm not hiding her, Luke said. I'm shielding her. Boots stomped on the porch planks. We'll burn this cabin down, one of the men threatened. Luke's grip on the rifle tightened. You try, he said, and you'll never make it to your saddles. The door handle rattled again, harder this time, and Mira squeezed her eyes shut. Noah whimpered again. She gently rocked him. Please, please no, please not again. Then footsteps thudded down the porch. Heavy, intent, moving around the side of the cabin. Luke breathed in sharp. They're spreading out, he said, raising his voice so Mira could hear him through the thin wall. Stay put. One man stopped at the back of the cabin. Another moved toward the window. A third stayed by the door, trapping them. Myra's pulse throbbed in her ears. Her husband's voice slithered through the walls. You got nowhere to go, Mira. Should have known better than to run. In the back room, tears slipped down her cheeks. Not from fear, but from something sharper. Shame, anger, exhaustion. She whispered into Noah's hair. I didn't run. I survived. Luke's voice rang out strong. You've got two choices, he said loud enough for all three men to hear. You turn around and ride home. Or what? Her husband snapped. You shoot us. No, Luke stepped forward. His shadow fell across the door. His silhouette was solid, square, unmoving. I won't shoot you unless you force me. But I will defend what's under my roof. What's under your roof is mine. Luke's voice dropped, deep as thunder rolling across open plains. No. She stopped being yours the day you raised your hand to her. Silence. A dangerous silence. Mira pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Her husband spit into the snow. So that's how it is? That's how it is. You ready to die for some woman you barely know? No, Luke said, but I'm ready to die keeping a child safe. A gun cocked outside the window. Luke didn't move. He exhaled once. Slow. Controlled. Then something inside Mira that had been frozen for years began to thaw. Because for the first time, a man was willing to stand between her and danger instead of being the danger. Outside, the men muttered. Snow crunched. Guns shifted. A fight was seconds away. And then, a new sound broke through everything. Another set of hooves. Fast. Approaching from the east. Luke's eyes narrowed. Someone's coming, he murmured. Her husband cursed. The rider slowed. Stopped. Dismounted. Then a deep voice called out. Arden, you in there? Luke's shoulders loosened a fraction. Mira's breath hitched. Help had arrived. But whose help? And for whom? The porch froze in silence. Boots hit the snow outside. More than one pair. Heavy. Purposeful. Mira held Noah tighter. Her breath caught halfway in her throat. She couldn't see the doorway from where she crouched in the back room, but she could feel the shift in the air, a tension changing direction like a wind turning before a storm hits. Luke didn't lower his rifle. He simply angled it slightly, adjusting his stance, preparing for whatever walked out of the dusk. Her husband hissed, "Who the hell is that?" Luke didn't take his eyes from the door. "That," he murmured, "sounds like Sheriff Dalton." Mira's stomach dropped. The sheriff? That could mean salvation or disaster. Another voice called through the cold. Arden, open the damn door before I kick it down. Luke hesitated, not because he feared the sheriff. He'd never once bent for authority, but because Mira and Noah were behind him, small and fragile and depending on him to choose right. He looked back toward the hallway, toward where Mira hid. Mira, he said quietly, voice pitched only for her ears. It's the sheriff. Not a friend, not an enemy, just a man who decides things. Mira swallowed hard. In her world, men who decided things were the ones she feared most. Luke must have seen the terror flicker across her face, because he said something that wasn't a promise, but felt like one. I won't let him take you. Her breath shook. She nodded. Luke stepped to the door, but he didn't open it. Not fully, just cracked it enough to see out. The cold rushed in like a blade. Sheriff Dalton stood on the porch, snow dusting his coat, his horse steaming behind him. 2 deputies flanked him, and in the yard, her husband and his 2 hired guns hovered, restless and angry. Dalton's eyes flicked past Luke to them, narrowing. Why in blazes do I hear shouting halfway across the valley? Luke answered evenly. They came to take a woman from my cabin. Dalton huffed. And you figured you'd handle that with a rifle? Luke shrugged. Seemed appropriate. Her husband stepped forward, chest puffed. She's my wife, Sheriff, and she stole my boy. I'm here to take back what's mine. Dalton looked at him, really looked, and Mira, from her hiding place, could feel the sheriff's judgment filling the space. Heavy, calculating, slow. Dalton removed his hat, slapped snow from it, and spoke in a voice worn from too many years of trying to keep peace where peace didn't want to live. Arden, he said, turning back to Luke, I'm not here to fight you. I'm here because 3 men rode into town kicking up dust and shouting about kidnapping. I plan to sort that out before anyone ends up in the ground. Luke didn't blink, then start sorting. Dalton stepped forward, boots crunching on the icy boards of the porch. I'm asking you, Cowboy. Do you have a woman in there? Luke didn't lie. Yes. Does she say she's in danger? Luke's jaw clenched. She didn't come here for fun and fresh company. Dalton exhaled loudly through his nose. Let me talk to her, Arden. No, Luke said. She's not stepping outside that door. Dalton raised one brow. You telling me you're refusing a lawful inquiry? I'm protecting someone who needs it. Her husband erupted. She don't need protecting. She needs correcting. Luke turned his head, just a fraction. And the look he gave that man was the kind that wild animals give right before they attack. Dalton lifted a hand sharply. Enough. Everybody stay where they are unless you want a bullet in your hide. The deputies stiffened. The hired guns shifted. Dalton looked back at Luke. Arden, I need to know if she's here by her choosing. Luke didn't hesitate. She is. Then let me ask her. Luke shook his head. She ain't ready to face him. His eyes flicked toward her husband. She may never be. Dalton muttered under his breath. This is why I hate winter. Everything gets complicated. Then he raised his voice. Mira, he called gently like one might call toward a wounded animal. You in there? Mira's lungs froze. She hadn't expected to hear her name fall from another man's mouth with anything resembling gentleness. Luke stepped sideways so she could see the sheriff through the door crack, just enough to know he wasn't lying about who stood out there. Dalton was older than she expected, lines on his face from sun and sorrow, eyes that had seen too much. Mira, he repeated, I'm not here to drag you anywhere. I'm here to hear your side. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm not going back with him. Dalton nodded slowly. Did you take your boy without his permission? Mira closed her eyes. Yes. Was he hurting you? A tremor skittered up her spine. Yes, she whispered. Even saying it out loud felt like rebellion. Dalton didn't flinch. Are you in Luke Arden's cabin by force? No. Are you wanting to stay? Her voice steadied. Yes. Dalton sighed, rubbed his forehead, then turned his ire, not toward Mira, but toward her husband. Boy, the sheriff snapped. Your wife ain't livestock. She's got her own damn say. She doesn't want to go with you. That's the end of it. Her husband snarled. That ain't the end of anything. She's married to me. Not anymore she ain't, Dalton shot back. A woman running for her life gets the law's protection, not scorn. The hired gun stepped forward. We ain't leaving without her. Dalton's hand dropped to the butt of his holster. And I ain't letting you leave with her. So unless you want 6 graves dug before sundown, back up. Tension crackled like lightning. Her husband spat into the snow. This ain't finished. Dalton's voice turned icy. You finish it here, you die here. Silence. Long, ugly. Then boots scraped backward. Saddles creaked. Men muttered curses as they mounted. Her husband pointed straight at the crack in the door. I'll be back for you, Mira. For the first time in her life, she didn't shrink. She didn't tremble. She didn't run. Because behind her, Luke's shadow towered, unmoving, unbreakable. Dalton watched the 3 men ride off before turning back. He lowered his voice. Arden, he said, you're in the middle of a storm you might not walk out of. Luke finally lowered the rifle. I've lived through storms. Dalton stepped closer, meeting Luke's eyes. She and that boy stay under your roof. They're your responsibility. Your danger. Your fight. Luke's jaw set. I know. Dalton studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. All right. Then you best be ready, because that man's coming back with more guns. Mira's pulse thundered. Dalton looked toward her again. You sure you want this? Mira swallowed, then lifted her chin. I'm done being afraid. Dalton exhaled. Well, then God help us all. He stepped off the porch, mounted his horse, and rode back toward town, leaving Mira, Noah, and Luke standing in a cabin that suddenly felt much smaller and much more dangerous. Luke closed the door, locked it, turned to Mira. His voice was low, soft. He's coming back. With men. With guns. Mira nodded. I know. Luke stepped closer. You don't have to stay. For the first time since she'd met him, she saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of danger. Fear of losing her. Mira shook her head. I'm staying. Luke swallowed hard. All right then, he whispered. We fight. The cabin felt different after dark. The walls creaked more. The wind pressed harder. Even the fire in the stove seemed to burn with a wary glow, like it knew danger was crawling closer through the cold. Mira laid Noah in his crib. He slept deeply, unaware that the world outside was sharpening its knives for them. Luke moved quietly through the main room, checking windows, oiling the rifle, laying out ammunition in neat lines. His movements were slow, deliberate, like a man preparing for a fight he didn't want but would never run from. Not again. Not after everything he'd already lost. Mira stepped into the doorway and watched him. He didn't hear her at first. He was too deep in thought, too wrapped in silence, shoulders stiff, jaw tight, eyes shadowed by something she hadn't seen before. Fear. Not of dying, but of failing. You've been pacing for hours, Mira said softly. Luke's head lifted. You should sleep, he said. I can't. He wiped his hands on a cloth. I know. Mira walked toward him, standing close enough to see the tension in his neck, the exhaustion in his eyes, the burden he carried like a man dragging chains. Sheriff Dalton said he'd likely come back, she murmured. He will, Luke said. When? Tomorrow. Maybe the next day. Depends on how fast he can gather men. Mira looked at the rifle on the table. You've fought before. Luke didn't look up. Yes. One. He paused. Survived. She heard the weight in that word. Survived. Not triumphed. Not saved. Just lived long enough to regret things later. Mira lowered herself into the chair opposite him. Luke, I know what you're going to say. No, she whispered. You don't. His eyes finally met hers, and she saw everything you try to hide. Guilt, weariness, the crushing fear of failing two people who depended on him. Luke, she said quietly, I don't want you to fight because of me. It's not just because of you. She blinked. What? Luke stood, walked to the window, looked out into the night where the dark swallowed the pasture. That man put his hands on you. On your boy. That tells me everything I need to know. Mira felt her heartbeat quicken. You barely know me. Luke shook his head. That's not true. He turned. Walk back. Stop just an arm's length away. I've watched you for a week. Mira, the way you flinch when someone raises their voice, the way you jump when a door opens too fast, the way you hold your boy like you're always expecting someone to take him. Her throat tightened. Luke's voice softened. You're a woman who's been hunted, hurt, blamed, and you're still standing. Her eyes stung. That doesn't mean you should risk your life for me. Luke answered simply, I'm not risking it. I'm choosing it. The room went still. Your husband's not coming here to talk, Luke continued. He's coming to reclaim something he thinks he owns. If you walk out of here with him, it won't end at his doorstep. He'll punish you for leaving, for hiding, for embarrassing him. Myra's skin prickled with memory. Knuckles, broken things, slammed doors, muffled cries. Luke's voice cut through the darkness. I'm not letting that happen. Her breath trembled. What if he kills you? Luke took a slow breath. Then at least Noah grows up knowing someone stood for you. Mira pressed her hand to her mouth. Tears burned her eyes. No one had ever stood for her. Not once. Not until him. Luke stepped closer, slow, careful, giving her room to back away if she needed. She didn't move. I'll protect you, he said, but I need to know if you want me to. There was a pause. A long one. Long enough for the fire to crack. Long enough for the wind to scrape the windows. Long enough for Mira to feel her pulse beating everywhere her fear lived. And then she answered, yes. Luke exhaled, like he'd been holding that breath for days. Then we fight, he murmured. She nodded. Together. He froze at that word. Together. It settled somewhere deep in him, a place he'd kept locked for years. Luke stepped back and began checking the rifle again. Mira watched him, then quietly stood, walked to the shelf, and picked up a small bundle wrapped in cloth. He frowned. What's that? She set on the table and unfolded it. A revolver. Old. Worn. But clean. My father's, she said. He taught me to shoot before he passed. Luke stared at her, surprise softening the rough lines of his face. You know how to use that? She nodded. I never told my husband. He'd have taken it away. Luke reached across the table, slid the revolver closer to her. Can you hit something? Mira met his eyes. Only if it deserves to be hit. Luke almost smiled. Almost. Show me, he said. They stepped outside into the cold night. Snow crackled under their boots. Luke set up a tin can on a fence post. Mira held the revolver with both hands. Luke stood behind her, watching, not touching her, not correcting her, just watching. She lifted the gun. Steady. Focused. Breath slow. Crack. The can flew off the post. Luke blinked. Well, he murmured, that answers that. Mira lowered the revolver. You said together, she said softly. Then let me help you. Luke stared at her. And for the first time since he'd found her on that snowy road, the ice inside him cracked. Mira, he said quietly, voice low, rough, almost broken. If anything happens to you, it won't, she cut in, because you'll be standing beside me. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, he looked like a man reaching for something he'd sworn never to reach for again. Hope. He stepped closer, just one step. Enough for the cold to turn warm. Enough for their breaths to mingle in the dark. Enough to feel the weight of everything unspoken pressing between them. Mira, he said softly, almost a whisper, when this is over, if we survive, we'll have to decide what comes next. Her breath caught. What do you mean? Luke didn't answer with words. He answered with a look that was not ownership, not possession, but something fierce, something protective, something new, something she'd never received from a man before. Respect. He finally said, I don't know what we are, Mira, but I know what we're not. Her heart pounded. What's that? Luke's eyes softened. Strangers. By sunrise, the ranch was too quiet. The kind of quiet the land holds before something breaks. Luke stood on the porch, rifle in his good hand, jaw set. He'd barely slept. Mira knew because every time she woke in the night, he was awake, watching windows, listening to wind, calculating danger with the steady patience of a man who'd already buried too much. Mira wrapped Noah in a blanket and moved beside him. You don't have to do this alone, she whispered. Luke didn't look away from the horizon. I'm not alone. They stood shoulder to shoulder as the pale morning spread across the snow. The cold sunlight made every fence post sharp, every shadow long. Even the cattle were uneasy, shifting, snorting, sensing something wrong. Then they heard it. Hoofbeats. Measured. Confident. Too many to be anything but trouble. Mira's breath trembled. Luke didn't flinch. A line of riders emerged over the ridge. 6 men, with Curt Dalton at the front. He sat his horse tall, polished, arrogant. A man who believed the law bent for him, and consequences were for other people. He reined in 20 yards from a porch. Mira, Curt shouted, voice carrying like a whip crack. You're coming home with me. Bring my son, or I'll take him myself. Mira stepped closer to Luke. Luke's body stiffened. Not with fear, but with something sharper. Protectiveness. Claim. Purpose. He lowered his voice just enough for Mira to hear. Stay behind me. Curt dismounted, boots crunching through snow. You think you can hide her? He sneered at Luke. You think she belongs here? With you. Luke stepped forward one slow, deliberate step. She doesn't belong to anyone. Curt's lip curled. She's my wife. She's a woman, Luke said, voice low and even. Not your property. The riders shifted uneasily. Curt laughed once, sharp, ugly. You're a fool, McBride. She's a curse. A liar. A runaway who stole my child. She saved that child, Luke said. You beat him. Beat her. And you're not touching either of them again. Curt's face went red. You don't know what she is. I know what she isn't, Luke answered. She isn't afraid anymore. Mira's breath hitched. Luke's words wrapped around her like armor. Curt's hand dropped his gun. Luke didn't blink. Draw, Luke said quietly. But know this. If you do, your men are bringing a body back to town today. Curt hesitated. Not out of conscience, but calculation. Luke was steady, balanced, deadly calm. The kind of man you didn't outshoot. Fine, Curt snapped. We do this legal. He looked. Past Luke to Mira. Your choices are simple. Come to me willingly, or watch him die for you. Mira felt the world tilt. The baby stirred in her arms, sensing her fear. Mira, Luke said softly, eyes locked on hers. Don't you take one step toward that man. Her heart squeezed. Luke, you walk to him, he'll hurt you again. He'll hurt Noah, and I will die trying to stop him. Luke's voice dropped, quiet but fierce. But if you stand with me, then we stand. Mira swallowed hard. Her hands trembled. Her spine straightened. She stepped forward, but toward Luke, not Curt, and stood beside him in full view of the riders. Curt's face twisted. Get back here, Mira. She lifted her chin. No, you ungrateful. You don't own me, Mira said, voice steady. You never did. You broke bones. You broke trust. But you didn't break me. Curt lunged forward. Luke was faster. He leveled his rifle, aimed at the ground inches from Curt's boots. Move one more inch, Luke warned, and I bury you right where you stand. Curt froze. The riders exchanged uneasy glances. They weren't paid enough to die in the snow. Mira felt Luke's voice like a hand around hers, steadying, anchoring. We're done, Curt, she said. No court. No sheriff. No bargaining. I'm not going back. You're making a mistake, Curt hissed. He'll toss you out when he's tired of you. Luke's jaw tightened. Mira, he said without looking at her, tell him. She stepped forward, her voice ringing in the cold air. I'm staying because I choose him. Luke's breath caught. Something shattered in Curt's eyes. Control, entitlement, the belief that Mira would always bow to fear. You're going to regret this, Curt said, stepping back toward his horse. No, Mira replied. I finally know what regret feels like. And it isn't this. Kurt mounted, glaring down at Luke. This isn't over. It was, and everyone knew it. He yanked the reins. His men followed, reluctant, shadows retreating across the snow. They rode away. Silence settled. The world exhaled. Luke lowered the rifle. His hands were shaking. Mira turned to him. Luke. He took a long breath, eyes locked on the horizon where Kurt had vanished. Then he finally looked at her. Really looked. You didn't run. You told me not to, she whispered. He stepped closer. You chose me. She swallowed. You chose me first. Noah whimpered softly. Luke reached out, hesitated, then touched the baby's head gently, reverently. He's safe now, Luke murmured. Because of you. She shook her head. Because of us. Luke's breath trembled. Something in him broke open, something he'd buried since the night he lost everything. He touched her cheek, thumb brushing a tear she hadn't realized she shed. Mira, he said softly, when this storm brought you to me, I thought it was bad luck. And now I think maybe it was the first mercy I've seen in years. Her chest tightened. The morning light caught Luke's face, carving gentle lines where grief had once lived. Slowly, carefully, he leaned his forehead against hers. If you'll have me, he whispered, I'll give you my home, my name, and whatever future I have left. Myra's breath broke. I don't want your name because I need saving, she murmured. I want it because you make me feel safe, and seen, and real. His hand found hers. So, is that a yes? She nodded. Yes, Luke. Luke let out a breath that sounded like someone finally laying down a lifetime of weight. He kissed her, soft, slow, a promise sealed in warmth against the winter air. Noah stirred between them, and Luke smiled through it. Our family, he whispered. Ours, Mira said. The wind softened. The ranch exhaled. A new season began. Their season, their home, their story, their second chance. Together. If you felt this tale in your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wild West Emotional Tales, where every story rides through the dust, the danger, and the kind of love that never dies. See you in the next tale, partner.